Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm Stephanie Hazel, and I've recorded this episode beneath the gaze of epic Wollumbin, where I live in Bundjalung country, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people of this land, as well as to the spirits and plants of this ancient earth. If you love what we do, you can support the Elder Tree mission of putting medicine in the hands of the people by joining our Patreon, where you can access special teachings from our presenters and our interviewees. So, let's walk into the moonlit forest together. Are you ready? Hello dear Elder Tree community, happy full moon in Aquarius. I'm delighted to share this month's Sacred Herbalism episode with you, all about trauma. We cover some really useful concepts of how to heal trauma through the body by re-regulating the nervous system, the digestive system, to rediscover a sense of safety and trust in your own body and community. So Daisy argues that talking about your trauma will never get you beyond it. Trauma is released through the body only. Now, if you're a herbalist or naturopath and in clinic, then this is really actionable and useful episode for you, since counselling is out of scope for us, but there's so much we can actually do with the nervous system and digestive system through using herbs, diet and healthy lifestyle tips. This month I'm interviewing Kaye Devine. She's a Taoist trauma transformer trained in Reiki and developmental trauma models. Now, how can I describe Daisy's breadth of experience and passion? She's a long-time Qigong practitioner, universal Tao instructor. She teaches Qin Tsang, Chinese organ massage. She's a highly experienced breathwork facilitator and teacher trainer. She founded and teaches 5 Elements ecstatic dance, which folds TCM elements and organ correspondences into ecstatic dance practices. And she's largely responsible for the cacao ceremony craze starting in Australia, being one of the original facilitators and also one of the original teacher trainers in cacao ceremony. She's been teaching Taoist, Tantric in alchemy programs for over 25 years. And she's also a dedicated and joyful plant walker. She has one of the most delightful medicine gardens I've had the pleasure of walking in Mount Tambourine. And she makes beautiful tinctures in her small herbal product line, Dancing Alchemy Herbs. So much experience to draw from, and I've known her for a long time, and so it's a real pleasure to interview her this month. She's also my best kept secret about my animist herbalist retreats. We'll talk about that a bit more in the episode. Now, trauma's a big topic, right? So do please pop your thoughts in the Spotify comments. Whether you agree with this conversation or don't, I love hearing all the responses. And if you love what we do, you can show your support through the Buy Me a Cuppa link to keep this project thriving. All right, enjoy the episode. See you next full moon, and thanks so much for being here. You make this hum, you make this worthwhile. We really appreciate you, our audience, and a special thanks to our Patreon supporters. Good afternoon, Daisy. Welcome to the Elder Tree podcast. It is very exciting to finally have you here.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey to make it, and what an absolute honour it is to be here. Thanks for having me.
No cyclones this week.
No cyclones this week.
So, maybe you could share how we met.
Oh, what a beautiful treasure. What a day that was. So I was managing a herbal shop in West End, Happy High Herbs, and there you came in. I remember I was answering a question with somebody, and you piped in a couple of little treasures, and I immediately offered you a job.
Yeah, I think I was 21. And I'd just come back from travelling around South America, and I'd really gotten inspired with plants, and I was kind of lurking in the Happy Herb shop thinking, oh, this is interesting.
And already you came in with such wisdom, and the ability to communicate it in such a clear way. And that's why I was so inspired by you. But what I loved about it was asking you to work the Sunday, and you were like, oh, I can't work Sundays because I've got this other job. And then they changed the day or something the next day. Like there was some synchronistic magic, some witchy business that brought you into the shop and made sure that you could be part of our team.
I'm glad that happened, because it was really a big part of my journey, that world. Many years Yeah, so it's lovely to be here, collaborating in a whole new way. And we've been collaborating lately because we run retreats together at your beautiful, beautiful home and retreat centre in Tamborine Mountain with an epic herb garden. I'm in total awe of your incredible herb garden. So yes, it's a very special opportunity to be weaving back together after 20 years.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful honour to be your apprentice. And in the herbs, how we turn around and come these full circles. So yes, I'm the alchemist witch and still the deep apprentice, even after so many years of listening. Like, the depth of listening just becomes more and more rich and exciting.
So today we are going to talk about trauma and herbs. There's lots of things we could talk about, but I really respect your wisdom with this, and I'd love you to tell us a bit about the aspects of your training, your journey that's led you to be here talking about trauma. What's your background, dear?
I suppose I'm a traumatised child at 50. So coming out of a quite an unsafe home environment with a schizophrenic father and dissociated mother. So I never felt safe in my body, in my family. None of us sleep. We're all chronic insomniacs because my father would be worse at night. So there was just such deep, chronic trauma responses. So, by the time I was 12, I had stomach ulcers. And by the time I was 18, I had stomach ulcers and colitis and full digestive shutdown, and I was like highly functional insomniac essentially. But it just became so evident that something needed to change at that point. And really at that point, I moved out of home at 15. I already had a breathwork and really strong yoga practice and was strong vegetarian and all of these kind of things. So I was really looking at diet and movement and health and breath practices and meditation to help bring more holistic life together and build safety, essentially, and became a massage therapist. So really, I found Chin Tseng, which is Chinese abdominal massage, when I was 18, coming out of the hospital with all these digestive issues. And just coming into the Taoist philosophy, it was like, oh yeah, of course. It just all felt really obvious. It was like, oh yeah, this is what I believe. So then, starting to work with digestive disorders and the body as an organism. But really, the deep focus of really consciously working with trauma has been probably in the last 10 to 12 years. And I think because the science really caught up. We were all doing all of these nervous system regulation practices, but not calling them that, And then the science became more and more evident. I went very, very deep into the developmental trauma field through biodynamic breathwork and trauma release through one of the breathwork trainings that I'd been working with and teaching through. I was one of their trainers there. So, so that's become a deep passion of mine, is really looking at developmental trauma. I still work with acute traumas. So with trauma, we have a developmental trauma, which is, this chronic condition of small t issues that happen and shape and form us physically, emotionally and spiritually. And then you've got more of your acute impact traumas, whether that be strong emotional impacts or accidents. And so in some of them you're working with exactly the same practices, and others pieces there's slight differences about how you approach those traumas. But essentially, ultimately, at the end of the day, loving kindness is kind of at the essence of it.
And so as well as that developmental trauma work and training and being a trainer and a therapist in those areas, you also have gone really deep into Qigong and Tantra, and you have been teaching Tantra and the integration of Taoist kind of sexual alchemy and bodily awareness with Tantra practices for a long time.
Very long time.
I think that's a really interesting thread in who you are. I've really wish I'd managed to get myself to one of your immersive trainings for women before I had my children. I had the freedom to just bugger off to Thailand for 2 weeks.
So I just want to name that because I think it's a really big part of who you are, that ability to move the energy and be aware of the subtlety in the body. And with that kind of Qigong background, that there's a lot of Chinese medicine. The Qinitsa and the Qigong, I know the way that you see the body is really influenced by Chinese medicine and Chinese 5 elements and organ theory. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you said you came out of hospital and discovered Qinitsa, am I saying that right? Qinitsang of Chinese abdominal massage, and you were coming across that Taoist philosophy, what was it about that philosophy you were reading that really jumped out at you?
I mean, it's kind of paganism, really. I mean, it's really the study of elemental intelligence and how that affects us. It's looking at the season. So, taking it down to the organs, if in a Taoist view, each organ represents a season, an emotion, a virtue, a colour, a planet, an animal, an element. So, you've got this deep connection to the actual life form, which is this planet. So it really helps you come home onto the planet and into the body and access the interconnectivity of all things. So it's like a deep animist practice ultimately, and I think that's why it really sang to me, because I was a bush child. I grew up in the country, and I was deeply connected to the trees and the stones and the animals, and felt like I was in deep relationability and connection to those things. And to come into a philosophy that really recognises the intelligence of the elementals, it really sang to me.
I think it's why as well, when we've been collaborating on retreats together and you've been doing all of this Qigong and 5 elements ecstatic dance, all these incredible embodiment practices that bring that intelligence alive, and then I've been working with the plants in a more animist framework, and these ways of connecting with the living world and the inherent intelligence in the plant world and the ecosystem. There's this really shimmering alive collaboration that we've discovered there that's been really fun.
It has been incredibly powerful, and I think at the end of the last retreat you sat on the couch and you're like, can you believe this is only the second retreat we've run together? It just feels like we've been doing it forever. And it's like, it's so complimentary, because I love your brain. Like you retain such incredible intelligent information, science background, where for me it's just like, well, in my body it feels like this, and so I love that the collaboration really deeply works for me, because I feel you fill in the spaces where I don't focus on the science piece so much, and I love that you can speak to it so clearly. Really inspiring. Something
that might surprise some people who listen to me prattling on about sacred herbalism all the time and the intuitive and the mystical. So sometimes I read things about trauma, I hear things about trauma, and sometimes I feel like the focus on trauma is a little bit over-exaggerated at the moment. I don't know if that's controversial, if everyone's talking about trauma. I've got this trauma, I've got that trauma, and sometimes it sounds to me like we are using our trauma as an excuse or a cop-out, or identifying with something that's happened in our life and never getting beyond that.
Using it as a justification.
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I think you're absolutely right. For me, and I've been looking at that because I'm creating a whole new program within my business structure with my healing field. And for me, it's like regulate the nervous system and become peaceful. We don't have to chase the trauma stories to resolve them. We need to turn ourselves towards connection and loving kindness and community and safety. And in the turning towards that, the nervous system and the digestive systems become whole and healed, and then there isn't a trauma. Where, so often we're digging up the why, when, how and where. And that is all story. So while we're attached to the story of our trauma, are we really actually healing it? because what I see over and over and over again is the healing comes through loving connection and presence. You know, and it's happened here now. It's happened in the past. There is a place, I think, for talk therapy in some instances, but ultimately it's about nervous system and digestive regulation and community connection. How do we feel safe? Because it's our lack of safety that is essentially behind trauma. Trauma is a lack of safety and a lack of connection.
A lack of trust in our safety.
A lack of trust in the safety. Yeah, feeling separated. Feeling at the end of the day. Most trauma is a feeling of separation in different ways that it manifests. So how do we cultivate connection and conductivity? And it's in that healing of our nervous system and digestive system and community. Because it's like we were meant to live in a village with our aunties and uncles and the kids and the grandparents together in a local environment. I really see that is the most healing environment to be in. We've got support, we have our place, we bring our gifts forward, we look to each other instead of screens, we actually feel deep connection and reverence, knowing that the neighbour's got your back and I've got the neighbour's back, and in that feeling is deep trust and safety. And for me, connection is like, how do we create loving connection and deep kindness with each other? And that's where the healing process is in healing trauma, for me, the way I view it.
And so do you think that trauma can be healed?
Healed or integrated. Because we've got to remember too that our traumas are our gifts. There's not one shaman on this planet that hasn't had a challenging path, that hasn't had traumas, and so we've got to remember too that, we can mine, I'm doing parentheses, either so we can mine our traumas for our gifts. And it's like, what is gifted out of these challenges? So I'm really super interested in developmental trauma. So looking at the different developmental stages from being in the womb till 7 or 8 years old. And the most people that are in the trauma field that are looking for actual healing are within the first two structures. So the womb and birthing trauma, and within the first sort of 12 months. So we have a schizoid and an oral structure. We're using William Reich's languaging. And these are the people that are mostly coming to healing. Your work, like my workshops, like when I look into my workshops, like they're primarily those two structures, because they're the ones that don't feel safe in their bodies and on the planet and have troubles connecting.
Talk me through schizoid and oral structure of trauma.
So a schizoid structure is a trauma in the womb or the birthing thing. So the parents might be really, really loving and love each other, but there's a war going on, so there's a sense of fear. Yeah? Or maybe it's a teenage pregnancy in a strict religious family, so then there's a lot of terror around the pregnancy, so there's a lot of fear contracting into the womb. There could be violence within the thing. So whatever it is, or you've got a complicated birth, you would have a schizoid structure. And the way you see that in the physical structure is an imbalance between the left and right, up or lower. So it's very normal for there to be a scoliosis or to have really strong digestive issues. Generally, someone with schizoid structure is like, I'm not from this planet, I'm from somewhere else. Yeah, this deep feeling of not being resonant in what being here.
So like one eye bigger than the other, or
exactly.
Those differences.
When you smile, one side goes up and one might go down. So you'll see sometimes in a really extreme case, it looks like a Frankenstein person. It's like this arm's from there and that leg's from somewhere else, and there's this. It's schizoid, like it's fragmented. It's a very fragmented state. But the gift of the schizoid state is that they get access to the Akashic field. It's like they stay in the spiritual realm And I'm one, so I can speak to it for myself. Like, there's so many times in my life I'm like, oh, I'll look at something and I'll be like, oh, I wonder how that works. And then boom, there's the answer. It's like, as soon as I ask it, it's like I get access to that information because it's in this upper realm. So in the feminine, someone with a schizoid structure might go more towards the spiritual, in the masculine, they might go more towards IT and sciences and things.
AI and things
and all of
non-human.
It's non-human, it's not in the body. You know, it's this other realm in which they get incredible access to. And so then in the oral structure, so maybe the womb was safe, the birth was great, but maybe the mother went into a depression, or the baby was preemie and was in an incubator and wasn't getting enough resonance. So in the oral structure, basically there's not enough resonance between the mother and the baby, and she's not available enough. So you'll see that physical structure in a person. The head will be reaching very, very forward, and the shoulders collapse down, the arms, because a baby reaches out to be picked up by the mum or the primary carer, and if the primary carer is not resonant to that, the exhaustion kicks in and the arms lose their power and they sort of dangle next to the body rather than having like life force. So you'll see the arms hold quite close to the body, they'll be quite thin, the shoulders will roll over and the chest will collapse, and then you have this head, forward moving head that's like, mummy, like they're trying to find something outside of themselves to become fulfilled.
And will that translate into kind of attention seeking or pleasing or approval seeking behaviours?
Yeah, so you get, with the oral structure, you get two primary arms. There's lots of arms that happen, but the two primary arms is, one of them becomes very needy and they'll stay the child. So you meet some girls with very cutesy little voices and these very baby faces, and they use manipulation to get what they need. You know, it's like, oh, I can't possibly do that, I'm not strong enough, can you do that thing for me? And they're always reaching externally to have their needs fulfilled. Or the child becomes the mother. They give what they need. You know, so there'll be they can go into people pleasing and, you know, looking after everybody else and trying to get that love through that. And then there's all these other structures that come out of it, can get quite complex, but that's two of the primary arms that happen through the orals. Yeah.
I think when we had a chat about this earlier, you said if I was going to be any of them, it'd probably be that one. I think you said that's a slight, and because I was preemie and they put me in an incubator for, I think it was only like 12 hours. And in the end, I was only 5 weeks early. So it was kind of borderline whether I really needed to be there. And my mum, bless her, she, having just had a fairly difficult birth with a lot of stress around her. The birth was actually fine, but there was so much stress around the preemie baby that it was quite an awful experience, I think, very disempowering for her. And bless her, she was sitting next to the incubator, and they're like, you can't be in here, you gotta go lie down, and she refused to leave. And when she was, she's still bleeding, she's like, I know, bless her, she's but I was still in that incubator for that time. In the end, the midwives forced the doctors to take me out and said, this woman needs to lie down. Like, she needs to lie down, she's going to pass out. And so that was, I feel a bit teary. Thanks, Mum. But still, that happened. And I do notice the slight head forward, the slight pleasing tendencies. I think I have obviously a very loving mother who was very present and available for me. But just that's enough, you were saying. Just that little bit's enough to just create a version of that imprint.
Yeah. And I love hearing that. It's like, my mother is a loving mother who is totally dedicated to being there, yet these things can still happen. And that's such a good reminder, is that trauma can happen even in the most loving families. And that just because we have these traumas or have these patterns or personality developments that come in response to these traumas doesn't mean that we weren't a loved and wanted child. But the psyche can make decisions around things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good story, because it's a good narrative to hold on to, because I do think that there's a lot of vilification of our parents in the trauma sphere. And as a parent now, it's like you're like, oh God, I don't want to traumatize my child. It's like, well, probably not you who's going to traumatize your child. I mean, there definitely are parents who make choices that are very traumatizing for their children, right? And hearing you speak, I can see in my daughter a bit of schizoid, a lot of digestive problems, a slight difference in how open her different eyes are. I notice it. And yeah, the birth was hard, and it wasn't her fault and it wasn't my fault. I fractured my sacrum when I was a teenager. So that made that first birth was hard to get that pelvis open, But we did it. And that's enough to just make that little imprint in that way. I love the clarity of the Reikian model, because it has these very different types, and that you can see them in the body, and that's so helpful. Right?
It really is incredibly helpful to be able to recognise those signatures, because it does mean that you don't need to do all the talk therapy. Like when someone comes in for a session with me, it's like I can just go straight into offering practices, and people are like, oh my God, how did you know that about
Because you can just see them come in.
I see it as soon as people come in.
It is so great, because one day we need to sit down and we need to map out together constitutional models, and then trauma models and plant medicine. So you can be like, not only are there these breathwork practices and these nervous system regulation practices, but also specific herbal medicines that will match the profile of those different traumatic imprints.
I would absolutely love that.
Yeah. Because I think that's very similar to someone who's a really skilled, I would say, kind of old world traditional herbalist who's working with any kind of constitutional map, whether it's person pictures style Dorothy Hall, whether it's specific indications, kind of Matthew Wood style, whether you're looking at Chinese medicine, elemental theory, and the different dominance of different elements, like a metal type or a fire type, whether you're looking at Ayurveda, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. When you start to have these typologies of constitutions and these maps, you can start recognizing things as people walk into the clinic, as they sit down, as they talk to you, and you can already be... It helps you with the process of elimination. Of all the different plants I know, of all the different breath work and energy work techniques that here's a handful that might work, and how do I then test them out against the person in front of me?
Yeah, how do I choose the right one for the right body structure? Which actually, I just want to bring up, became much clearer for me after studying with you with the herbs, with the plant allies, because hearing everyone's experience of the herbs and being able to see their different types of constitutions really helped me place it more.
Yeah, that's the power of the group, right?
I think power of the group,
we learn much better in groups, because you have that experience of, obviously if we were in a group doing this trauma work and you were like, okay, this person's a this, that person's a that, and then everyone's sharing their experience from the perspective of that archetype, then you start to actually get a real... a lived experience and a picture of the other archetypes that aren't yours, and then you can recognize them. Yeah. Amazing. So how would you go about supporting someone to integrate their trauma?
So many ways.
What would you like? So the people who are listening to this podcast are generally, they're plant walkers. So they might be clinic as a herbalist or a naturopath, or they might be studying herbal medicine, or they might be someone who's deeply moved by the world of plant medicine and feel on that path in some way. For people in that space, what are some tools they can be giving or using themselves to help integrate that trauma?
Yeah, but look, passionflowers just shining brightly, like waving those curled tendrils at me right now. I have friends that fantasize about dosing, the town's water supply on LSD and things like that. Like for me, it's passionflower and lemon balm. I'm like, I just want to dose the world, high dose for a few months on passionflower and lemon balm, and then just see what happens after that.
I actually think someone asked me that in an Ask Me Anything episode. If you could dose the whole world on any one herb, what would it be? And I thought about it. I said, probably passionflower. Amazing. We'll definitely get into the herbs in a minute. I think we have some great herb jam, because as we haven't really fleshed out, but you've actually have worked with plants I would call you a folk herbalist and a, intelligently aware herbal walker, plant walker, that use plants a lot in your life and make medicine. So I'd love to jam out some plants for nervous system with you. But first, I'd love it if you would give me a broader framework for how you think about resolving and integrating trauma in your work.
So integrating trauma for me is really looking at the effect on the nervous system and the digestive system. So these create an interwoven pillar that support us in our presence, in our life. So really looking at nervous system regulation practices, whether you're working with the jaw and somatic movement and, like using breath work and felt sense practices, really looking at the here and now and using the sensory intelligence to build our present moment awareness practices, as well as digestive things. So that means also ingesting herbs, but also looking at the condition of the digestive system and what might need to be supported in that, so that the body can feel safe and get absorption of these nutrients that are coming in. So the weaving of the nervous system and digestion is so essential for us to have really long-term change from trauma.
I've never come across someone else talking about digestive system and trauma, so it's really fascinating to me, but it kind of makes sense to me just in an intuitive response. I'm like, oh yeah, I can feel that in myself. And we do have so much science in the last, let's say 10, 15 years, probably paralleling the nervous system trauma impact science. There's a lot of science about how the nervous system affects the gut and how gut affects brain health and mental health, right? And yet somehow I haven't personally put those pieces together to say that our digestive system will be affected by trauma and that we need a good digestive system to integrate trauma. I love that. Yeah,
well, when we look at the brain in Chinese medicine, they look at the gut as the second brain, or even the first brain, really, and how this is where we build so much of our serotonin and our capacity to nourish the brain is in the gut itself. And like what I find really exciting about the nervous system and the digestive system is that you have this wandering nerve, the vagus nerve, which is responsible for our rest and digest. And 80% of the fibres are from the organs and the senses moving up to the brain, and only 20% of the fibres move from the brain back down to the body. So the way I see it is that our senses, so our eyes and ears, they're ruled by certain organs. So if the organs are in dysfunction or depletion, then those sensory systems don't perceive clearly. So liver's a really easy one to work with. So the liver rules over the eyes. Yeah, so you have one or two drinks and the quality of the liver is spring and abundance, and so you want to buy everybody a drink and everyone's gorgeous and you're in this expansive spring state. But then you have a few more drinks and the liver starts to feel really stressed. And then what we start to perceive through our eyes, so instead of seeing an innocent conversation between our partner and a stranger or somebody else, we can then layer jealousy, or, it shadows the perception in which we perceive. So that's why organ health is so important to our nervous system, because the organs rule over the filters of our perceptions.
I love that, because I've definitely come across the map of, in Chinese medicine, the liver opens to the eyes, and so things like blurry vision or floaters in the eyes can be an indication of liver stress, and that's a very physiological way of thinking about it, right? But what you're talking about is the more psycho-emotional aspects of these organs and these senses, and the way that it fits this story. Think of like a bitter old alcoholic who just sees everything and everyone in the worst possible light.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It maps across really beautifully to some of these kind of stereotypes that we have. And often we have stereotypes because there's an archetypal truth inside them, right?
Absolutely. And so that can really help to inform us with herbs that we might choose as well, because so if someone has a tendency to a particular emotion or virtue, then you really get an indicator of those organs. You know, so stomach and spleen is about the earth and our sense of safety and belonging. You know, so if that's lacking, then you're going to be really looking at spleen health. Lungs is grief, but it's also our courage. You know, it carries with it the strength of metal. It's the time of autumn, so it's where we bring in the harvest and sort out that which is needed and that which is treasured. You know, and then the kidneys are about our fear and fearlessness. So if someone's very depleted in the kidney adrenal cortex, then the thought of going to a party on the other side of town and not really knowing how to get there would just be absolutely terrifying. But someone with really strong kidney chi would just be like, what? There's a great party, we're not exactly sure, but let's go, you know. So you can really start to look at which organs are being affected by what are the emotions that are our strengths or weaknesses, and they're indicators to that organal health.
So a good question there, I think, that I would use in clinic would be, when you're really stressed or feeling really out of balance in your mental health, what kinds of thoughts occur for you? What kinds of feelings emerge? How does the world seem? And if someone's like, everything just seems really overwhelming and really scary, and really, I just feel really anxious, I'd think of that, what you're talking about, that kidney adrenal cortex. Or someone's saying like, I just feel really angry and irritated and everyone's just annoying, then I'd think of that liver gallbladder, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or I feel really unsafe, really ungrounded, really disconnected, then maybe that earth spleen function. I'm not sure why, but a plant that is coming through for me right now is globe artichoke, so Cynara scolymus. So it's the leaf of the vegetable that we eat, and it's a really beautiful, bitter, aromatic digestive herb. And it's the first herb that I sat down and was like, all right, I'm going to give this whole, plant communication thing a go. And there just happened to be, in the rental property I was in, this massive globe artichoke plant in the back garden. I went and sat down and I did a little meditation, grounded myself, I chewed a bit of the leaf, I looked at it, and I just sat there, and I received actually quite a clear message. And the artichoke said to me, I hold the bitterness of life so that you can let it go. It's a very bitter plant, but it has this beautiful aromatic quality as well. And the bitter aromatics, like mugwort, like wormwood, like rosemary to a lesser extent, not as bitter, all of these plants have a strong action on the digestion because they stimulate the liver, and they also have that aromatic component that creates relaxation in the enteric nervous system. And it's really good for high cholesterol, for gallbladder problems, but it had this teaching, it was telling me, really aligned to that Chinese medicine map. It's a liver, gallbladder, digestive tonic that's saying, stop being so bitter, I will be the bitter. Yeah. You can let go of the bitterness.
I love that.
Anyone out there with issues with bitterness, resentment? Anyone listening and you feel like your digestion is a bit sluggish? Maybe there's gallstones or constipation, those kinds of things. Then give a Cynara scolymus a go.
Yeah, or inflexibility.
To get that bile flowing and softening the liver. So some other plants that we have, we've talked about together. You were just talking about passionflower. Dosing the whole world. Please don't dose the whole world with passionflower unless you're depressed and cold. Because no plant is good for everyone. Yes. Or in low doses. So passionflower, the way I think of passionflower is very much as the calmer of the restless mind or obsessive thinking, anxiety, not only for an anxious type, also for a more livery irritated type, because it has that cooling quality. It doesn't have a bitterness, but it has a real cooling, moving the tension out of the jaw, the neck, the shoulders, the head, out of the nervous system, reminding you that you can breathe, you can let it go, and the mind can still.
That's it. Because the word that I'm listening to you speak about, passionflower, it's like I just kept hearing the word grasping. So if there's that sense of grasping, addictions and things like that, I find passionflower really helps to soften the hands. To let things go that aren't really serving us, but things that we're using to keep ourselves distracted or whole or less than soften.
So I've taken passionflower in a Plant Allies week, and what I noticed, actually when I was pregnant, and what I noticed is that in the week I was taking passionflower, I was much better at making good choices that were nourishing for myself and letting go of the ideas of shoulds or buying into the stress story that I was telling. This story of like, I got to do this, got to do that, deadline this, can't possibly make myself a good lunch. Can't possibly make myself a good lunch, can't possibly exercise or go for a walk, must do all these things. The passionflower created that space between me and my stress narrative so that I could actually make better choices around self-care, which is what I needed as a pregnant woman.
You love your passionflower.
Yeah.
Such a nice one.
And there is some interesting research around passionflower and addiction. I will put the links to the studies in the show notes, but off the top of my head, it's around they were giving passionflower to rats and getting them addicted to both nicotine and morphine, and by giving the passionflower for a few weeks leading up to taking rats off these drugs of addiction, that the addictive responses and the withdrawals they were expecting happened so much less. So it almost like detached the addiction before even removing the substance of addiction.
And was this study attached also to that rat study that had rats on these drugs and then gave them community, and the ones, have you seen that research? Oh, it's beautiful, where they create this rat city and put them all on drugs. I can't remember what sort they were, but they would, so they were all addicted, they were all on them, and then they brought in a fun park for all the rats, so they had places for them to nest and be really cozy, and they had a whole community, and then they had water plus the drug water, and most of the rats weaned themselves off the drugs and were happily in their community, because community was there, and really looking at the value of connection and how that affects our addiction, our need to grasp it for these external things. Yeah.
I actually have read that a long time ago. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one to revisit.
And the rats that are just on their own in a little boring metal uncomfortable cage are just like, give me the drugs, give me the drugs, give me the drugs. Of course, wouldn't you?
Yeah. When you got no one to snuggle up to.
Just some cold bars and fluoro lights. Yeah. So speaking of rat studies, I just want to interject here that something that I really don't like about the whole evidence-based herbal medicine, quote unquote, is that a lot of the evidence that we're drawing on is dependent upon really cruel treatment of animals, especially rats. And I don't really love basing my practice of herbal medicine on the torture of animals. It's actually not kind, and yet that's what we have. So these studies are very interesting, but I just want to put that out there as an ethical conundrum for people. Yeah.
And luckily in herbalism we do have the resources of hundreds of years of experimentation and usage to glean our information from also.
So I do often feel a little bit annoyed when all this huge amounts of expenses and then animal torture goes into confirming what we already knew to be true, if only we gave authority to those kinds of, old practices as we do to science. And we could design really clever human trials that would tell us even more than this, right? So that said, there's one more study I want to talk about, which is about reishi, and I think it ties so beautifully into your discussion of developmental trauma in early childhood. And this study really helped me understand something about reishi. So in this study, rats were two groups of rats. That was a mouse study. They looked at the impact of early life stress on adult responses to stress. And so they separated baby mice from their mothers for 4 hours a day for the first 21 days, which is kind of up until adulthood for a mouse. So they had two groups. They had one group that got to stay with their mothers and one group that were separated for 4 hours a day. It's not that much. I mean, it's significant, but it's not like they were never with their mothers. And this led to physical changes, so a smaller thymus, a bigger spleen, inflamed microglia of the hippocampus of the brain, and increases in pro-inflammatory cytokines in the blood, as well as behavioural changes, so physiological changes in the organs. The sizes of the organs were different. And the behaviour change, so they reacted much more intensely in a more distressed way to stresses than the non-traumatised baby mice as adults, like being restrained in a small cage for an hour. The things when we talk about trauma, we can see that developmental trauma can make us really overreact. I don't mean like act out like a drama queen, but literally have a bigger physiological response to something that's actually not a big deal.
Yeah.
And then
that band of resilience is just not there to source from. Yeah, so the band of resilience is really formed in those informative years, and a baby's nervous system is 100% reliant on the primary carer's nervous systems. So again, the parents might be really loving the children, but if they don't feel safe in their own body and they have a very small band of resilience, then the child never actually learns. And so the amygdala stays really small. You don't get that development of the amygdala and good, healthy stress responses when there's not that to mimic from off the nervous system itself.
Yeah, having just gone through that early infancy stage with my son, co-regulation is so powerful. And also for all the toddler parents out there, co-regulation during tantrums, like taking your awareness off your child's behaviour and onto just sitting and breathing and feeling your own nervous system calm down. It's the quickest way through a trauma that I've found yet.
Yeah, absolutely, because the children are absolutely regulated to you. And I just wanted to say one thing about trauma and parenting. Science, whatever that is, shows us now that you only need to get it right 30% of the time for your child to be mostly really regulated in the world. So I think that takes off a lot of pressure. It's like 30% of the time, I can do 30%. Like, that's good. So all of you beautiful parents out there, you're doing a great job. You only need to get it right 30% of the time.
Thank you for that, because I definitely don't get it right all the time. So back to the reishi mice, what they found in this study was that they gave reishi mushroom ganodermic acid triterpene, so an extracted alkaloid from reishi, over 2 weeks once they were adults, and they did two things. So interestingly, it completely reversed all the physical changes. So the enlarged spleen, the increase in pro-inflammatory cytokines, they actually completely resolved to be the same as the non-traumatized mice. And it, after 3 weeks, it led to normal behavioral responses to trauma. So we're talking about a mouse lifespan. So maybe for a human, 2 and 3 weeks isn't enough time.
It would be equivalent to 8 or 9 months. What do you think?
Probably 8 or 9 months, yeah. I imagine. Yeah. So whether that's how long we'd know, and how much we can extrapolate from a mouse study, I'm not entirely sure. But there is something. It shows us that, one, the link between the physiological changes and the behavioural changes are so important. Interestingly, the physiological changes resolve first. I would have thought it the way around. Was that you need the organs to change before the behaviour changes.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's why, I work so deeply with nervous system and digestion in the trauma resolution trainings that I share.
And you literally get your hands on people's organs through the Chin Hit Sang, right?
Absolutely.
And so but reishi then allowed, we can use herbs that down-regulate the nervous system to integrate these things. And passionflower is an example. Reishi, for me, is so great because it gives a sense of inner ground. So I don't think it's the right herb for everyone. But for people who don't feel like there's a ground, maybe it's the...
schizoid.
Maybe it's the schizoid. There's there's a lack of inner ground, a lack of connection to feeling the sacredness of life, and like you've got your roots in the ground and your spores in the ether, right? That like strong anchor down. Your mycelium is deep in the earth, but you're still reaching for the sporic heavens, right? And in Chinese medicine, in Taoism, they say that reishi is the bridge between the heaven and earth. Like that's so powerful, right? But it also regulates the gut immune response. So a lot of people that I've worked with reishi who've had sensitive indigestion that respond, maybe they're not celiac, but they're gluten intolerant or have different food intolerances, they have improved their reactivity on reishi. So that again ties into this digestive thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, great reflection, love that.
We've got reishi, passionflower, and globe artichoke making appearances here. Are there any other plants that you use in your work for people? Or how do you go about prescribing herbs or working with plants for someone?
I have a little collection of herbs that, like tinctures that I personally make, and sometimes I just let people pick, like I watch what they pick up, because they tend to always be in front of the thing that they actually need. And working with Happy High Herbs, I would see that so many times, especially at festivals. You'd be, working this big space, and people would be wandering around, and then they'd be standing in front of you. You'd finally get to talk to them, and they'd ask a very specific question, and they would 99% of the time be right in front of the herb that they were after. So it's teaching people to trust their own gut instinct as well. So really slowing down and moving into deep listening, I'm working really, really closely with the Vietnamese lemon balm over the last couple of years, and the effects are profound. And what it works specifically with stomach, spleen, and the lungs. So it's about how safe do I feel? Do I feel grounded and connected to my body? And what's my capacity to bring in life, but also let go of what's moving away? And I think that's why it works so powerfully with people with anxiety and alcohol addiction and things like that, because it helps to repair that disconnect of being in the sacred earth, of feeling connected and wholeness. So I use her a lot. And also the blue lotus. I mean, we're working with that water system, really. And blue lotus grows in tranquil waters. So it carries with it the medicine of tranquility. So even though our own waters might be a wild ocean, when we bring in the essence of the lotus is with its stillness. And it also anchors into the three dantians. The roots are in the mud. So we're anchored deeply into the mud, and from there we rise through the waters, through the unseen, until we reach this lake of tranquility where there's this deep resting state. And then from this deep rest, after expansion, there's the next set of expansion where the flower rises up and beyond that which is tranquil and opens its flower to the sun. And then when the sun goes down, it closes its flower again. So it really reminds us to rest when we need rest. To, yes, open to the sun and to be part of that community, because the lotus is alive with the bees and all of these incredible exchanges. And then it holds this intelligence. It's like, oh, when the sun starts to set, it's time to pack up shop and to rest deeply again. And I really love that wisdom of the flower, teaching us how to slow down, cultivate our tranquility, and pause in between action.
I discovered recently that lotus, and that's going to be the most poetic and beautiful description of a lotus, or the blue lily also, that I've ever heard. Thank you for that. I will not forget that description. And the blue lily, Nymphaea caerulea, so often called blue lotus, is also a medicine that calms histamine. So it reduces how much histamine we produce to irritation. Now, histamine is one of the stimulating and awakening molecules. We have a little burst of histamine early in the morning that gets us going. Histamine irritates the brain cells into awakeness and activity, but it also causes a lot of inflammation, redness, heat, flushing. Histamine is often a problem in menopause and perimenopause.
I'm pointing at my hips right now.
So there's something there around that coolness of the tranquil waters mapping across to that biochemistry really beautifully.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Pleasure. Yeah, just something else that came to mind with the Vietnamese lemon balm. I think before we were chatting, before we started recording, we were talking about something like Vietnamese lemon balm, which is, there's a bitterness to it, but it's an aromatic nervous system herb, an aromatic nervine, we would call that in Western herbalism. And there's a whole class of herbs there that work with that interface of the digestion and the gut, right? You were saying, and I hadn't thought to put that together for trauma, right? But you do have a whole bunch of, I'm sick to my stomach, I've got a knot in my stomach. These terms we use for the relationship between the intelligence of the organism, the nervous system, and the gut, or like a gut feeling. All these words we use that speak to an older understanding and awareness of the body. And there's a whole class of herbs like lemon balm, European lemon balm, Vietnamese lemon balm, even chamomile is an aromatic digestive if you use it correctly, peppermint, all of these plants that create this sense of warmth and ease in the gut and calm the mind and soothe the mind and down-regulate the nervous response. They probably have a very strong action on the vagus nerve that allow digestion to happen by switching us out of sympathetic activation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some beautiful herbs to think about there. Is there anything else that you'd like to add as we come to the end of our episode around this question? I mean, actually, I have a question for you. This is the Sacred Herbalism segment of the podcast. So how does this dysregulation of the nervous system that is often a response to developmental trauma, how does that affect our ability to be with the sacred, to open to that beautiful awareness of the numinous beauty of every moment, right?
In hearing that invitation, it's like if we don't find safety in the body, then we often find it in nature. So when there is deep traumas that affect our capacity to feel really safe, there's this deep sacred connection to nature that becomes our ally, and gives us access to the unspoken pieces. When we're in survival mechanisms, we become acutely aware of the cues that happen around us. So the sense of connection to nature can be really deeply amplified, actually. And I love that question. That's something I will definitely contemplate more as I leave here.
Kind of expected you to say almost the opposite, that when we're in a hyperactive nervous system state, we can't connect to that place. But actually, I really love that invitation of leaning into the traumatized child inside us who is so hyper-aware that they can feel all of the kind of mystical spaces in between that lie behind the natural world. And if anyone wants to go back and listen to my interview that I interviewed Tatiana Dawn, one of the other presenters here, early on in the piece, I'll link to it in the show notes as well. She speaks a lot about how her own trauma led her to develop a relationship with the natural world around her, because she couldn't find that in her home and her family and her community, so she went to the community of plants.
Absolutely.
And started that relationship with the wilds. And I think that there's a point there that the earth is our original mother. If we can't have a good relationship with our own mother, or we have something that's broken there, we can find that sense of safety and ever-present love and acceptance in the earth, in Gaia as our mother. And just like a baby co-regulates with their mother, we all co-regulate with the earth.
Yes.
And so remembering to lie on the ground, to breathe with the trees, to gaze at the stars. That is a profound act of co-regulation, that we're not just alone, we literally are syncing our bodies to the earth. And so much of the kind of newfangled, biohacking, optimize your performance stuff, like, look at the sunshine in the morning, go for a walk in the afternoon to get the evening light into your eyes, don't eat when it's dark, intermittent fasting, all of that is just how humans live when we are in deep relationship with the earth.
Absolutely.
It's like, fire, like, guess what? Fires and candles don't put your blue light receptors out of whack. Yeah, of course, because sitting around a fire is an ancestral, ancient human thing that regulates us. Tells us it's nighttime, time for dreaming, time for stories, When you wake up in the morning and you do a sun salutation, you move your body and greet the dawn, of course it sets up all the hormonal cascade that we need for our cortisol and our melatonin, histamine, We are meant to be co-regulating with the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And each other. And listening to ourselves, I think that's the biggest invitation, is how do we listen to the divine intelligence of our own mycelium, our own fibres and fluids, and that practicing that deep listening. And when we learn to do that for ourselves and then we can offer it to others, that's really where the medicine is, of healing traumas or separation. It's like, how can we find the pathways back to connection? And plants are such a beautiful way to do that. It's smell them, touch them, the taste, really coming into the very visceral experience of their physicality invites us into the invisible wisdoms that are behind that. It's like, the feeling of smelling the lily, the blue lily. It's like
it's perfume. It's
intoxicating. It's like, you can't help but feel the sacred in the scent. Thanks for exploring these with me today.
Pleasure. And if someone wants to work with you, how can people get in touch with you? What can they do with you?
You can come and roll around on the floor and do weird things. That's primarily what I do with people. No. No, well, I have Miao Shen Temple. So Miao Shen is one of the names of Kuan Yin, who is the goddess of compassion and kindness. So I have a Kuan Yin temple on Tambourine Mountain where I do retreats and trainings to do with trauma, digestion and medicinal plant walks and fasting and things like that. So Daisy Kaye Devine, which is a DEVINE.com, will take you to my website and have a look, reach out, say hello.
You do one-on-one work as well?
Yeah.
You also do retreats and trainings for practitioners to learn how to do Chinese organ massage and some of other things. Amazing. Yeah. I look forward to doing it at some point. And we have pegged for early next year, dates to be confirmed, a very exciting collaborative retreat, Rest into the Earth, looking at regulating the nervous system through plant medicine, embodied practices, animist practices connecting to the earth, and a bunch of these beautiful embodiment practices that Daisy's been speaking about. Not quite sure exactly what that looks like yet, but I can't wait. It will be so fun. You're such a dream to collaborate with. Holder of many wisdom and threads that you are.
Thank you.
Whiz in the kitchen as well. Just if anyone's interested, great food at the retreats.
Yeah.
You're like, what about all my many years of dedicated training and teaching? So if you're keen to know more about that, please jump on the wait list. There'll be a wait list. It will be thinking maybe February or March next year after the madness of summers settle down. And get onto Daisy's website, check it out. And I'll be taking my own group of students through the Wild Edge of Herbalism retreat with some beautiful qigong and dance and other bits and pieces from Daisy Kaye.
About the lives of her as our work strengthening through grassroots herbal education starts right here. I'll see you next time the moon is round in the sky, and until then, I wish you good health and many plants.